Good morning, and welcome to First Unitarian Church of Providence, where we love beyond belief. My name's Neil Bartholomew. I will be your worship associate for today. Our minister, Reverend Liz Lerner-McClay, is away this week. Today's service was originally prepared for one of our summer services, when we had a series of 3 services featuring the works of the 3 ministers who occupied our pulpit for nearly all of the 20th and part of the 19th centuries. But a hurricane caused us to postpone the service, and so we are having it today. More on that in a moment. Now, let us center our hearts and minds as we begin our worship together. Please join in our unison chalice lighting, which is in your order of service. This light burns also in our hearts, and it lights our path towards harmony, justice, and hope for all. This morning we are pleased to have Sandy Schacht reading from the work of his father, Reverend Dr. Robert H. Schacht. This was, as I said, one of 3 services this summer. It was intended to be one of 3 services this summer, focusing on the work of the congregation's 3 long-serving ministers of the 20th century as part of our celebration of the congregation's 300th anniversary. All of the music today is written by Johann Sebastian Bach, reflecting the fact that Reverend Schacht's sermon that Sandy will be reading is about Albert Schweitzer, whose talents included playing Bach's music on the organ and who wrote a well-known biography of Bach. This is the time when we used to get up and walk around and greet each other, but during this time we just stand in our place, look around, and wave to the people around us. So please do that. You should have your mask.
Oh, okay. Again, so you're headed outside.
Just follow what I do. Yeah. And Ralph Miro suggested that I remind you that you have to get pretty close to the microphone upstairs.
Okay.
And let's also wave to the folks at home. There's a camera right just up there in the balcony, and yet where Michael is waving to us, you can wave to the folks at home. Welcome, everybody. Reverend Dr. Robert H. Schacht was one of 3 children. He grew up in Brookline, Massachusetts, and attended Harvard Divinity School. His ministry at our congregation lasted for 37 years, from 1931 to 1968, a very eventful and varied 37 years. Dr. Schacht had a reputation as a warm, kind individual committed to humanitarian, civic, and social issues. He helped found the World Affairs Council of Providence and the Rhode Island State Council of Churches, from which we, of course, were later removed because we were not specifically Christian, but we are back in it now. He was very ecumenical and enthusiastic networker with other clergy of his day. He valued his Catholic, Jewish, Baptist, and Quaker friends, and the church leaders of those other denominations were very close colleagues of his. As an example of this ecumenical spirit, Rabbi Braudiv from Temple Bethel gave the eulogy at Reverend Schacht's memorial service. At his urging, Reverend Schacht's urging, the church sponsored an interracial Boy Scout troop for many years, which was a very controversial thing to do at that time. He also hired as an assistant minister Reverend William Jones, one of the rare African-American clergy in our denomination at that time. We have considerably more now, but maybe we could use more. He worked tirelessly to support the enforcement of fair housing laws against racial discrimination, resulting in stones being thrown at his house periodically. Another outward manifestation of his inward values was how he shared his love of nature and respect for the natural world and reverence for life in all its forms. He loved snakes, and once even took in a pregnant hog-nosed snake, nurturing her young in a terrarium after the eggs hatched. His curiosity about why people hate snakes later broadened during his life to an exploration about why people hate each other. His ability to communicate with the animal world in general was exceptional. He was once seen to break up a serious dogfight by getting close to the violent confrontation at significant personal risk, calming the dogs and separating them through the power of his presence. He was not just a man of intellect, but also very handy with fixing things, including watches and internal combustion engines, and he was quite capable with plumbing and electrical work. He enjoyed the mechanical world as well as the world of the mind. I will now read excerpts from the speech that he gave at his retirement dinner, illustrating not only the joy that he took in the company of clergy from other religions, but also the joy that he took in the cooperative spirit that he sensed within this congregation. So, from his speech. The supreme delight of this occasion tonight was foretasted by me, and I expect by all of you here who participated in it, by our Jubilee service in the fall of 1965 in our meeting house when carrying out the happy suggestion of Dr. Arthur Wilson of Beneficent Church. We held that celebration of, quote, 100 years of friendship. I had come in September of 1931, Rabbi Braude in September of 1932, Dr. Wilson in January of 1933. November of 1965 made our total ministerial service in Rhode Island add up to just 100 years. They had been years of such happy and deep personal friendships and so richly supported by our congregations that such a celebration seemed in order. I myself was in about the highest ecstasy for 3 solid hours that I have ever experienced. It symbolizes so much of our feelings about religious and human brotherhood, which can be developed through religion and mutual affection at its best. And it is that same ecstasy which my wife and I feel here tonight. It is impossible to cite in these moments all the people and events which have made my ministry here so satisfying and deeply happy. I look out and see friends from all formal religious backgrounds, to include rabbi comrades and also Swami Akhilananda of the Vedanta Society and his later able and affectionately esteemed successor, Swami Savakadananda. Time precludes other than this symbolic reference to the cooperative community spirit and work in which I have had the joy to participate. When I was courting my wife, she at one point asked the needful question, "What do I have to do to be a minister's wife?" My succinct reply was, "Be yourself." There was real possibility that this was an inaccurate generalization, for so much depended on the church or churches where I might be called to serve. Yet how beautifully the people of our church have let her be herself, and how wonderfully your Spirit has drawn out her love and loyalty and work for this church we all know and love so much. And what has been her experience has, of course, so deeply been mine. One of the distinctly great aspects of our church is that it has never been a minister-dominated church, nor a congregation-dominated church. Indeed, I have never found that I could speak of my church, but simply our church. It has been a remarkably democratic team relationship, ever sensitive to the individual's emotional and spiritual needs, as well as intellectual. This living tradition has carried on, therefore, a deeply loving, problem-solving method of procedure in all matters, rather than a controversial one involving feelings of hostility. We are all fallible and make mistakes. How well we know. Yet, when we have made them, we have been able to get up and go on as usefully and lovingly as we can. What a tradition this has been, and how much we all hope it will always be central in the life of our church. May I observe that I think the people of the church I have served these many years are about as remarkable a fair-minded, ethically sensitive, democratically responsible group of beings as can be found in any of our churches. Words cannot say how much I love and admire them. And again, that's excerpts from the speech that Reverend Schacht gave at his retirement dinner.
Good morning, everyone. One of the ways First You transform love into action is by the sharing of the joys and the sorrows that connect us in beloved community. If you'd like to participate in this ritual and you're here, you may write your joys and sorrows in this book and please sign your name. And if you are at home, you can send an email to me anytime before Saturday at noon. We welcome all of your joys and sorrows. A candle of well wishes this morning for Craig Wood as he recovers from an illness. A candle of recovery for Maureen Pryor, who was just getting over a concussion, but ended up in Rhode Island Hospital again last week for another illness. We hope she gets well. A candle of joy for Jackie Nye as she prepares to start a new job on November 1st. A candle of joy for my engagement with my partner of 7 years. I'm very excited for the next steps of life together. And a candle of joy to Brian and Samantha Tiza, who will celebrate their wedding ceremony here today. My friends, let us rest in the gladness that we have one another to share our joys and our sorrows. It makes all the difference, I assure you. I'm going to offer a prayer now, and this prayer is from Robert or Bob Schacht. It was originally presented on the 250th anniversary of this congregation and now is re-presented as part of our 300th year anniversary celebration. And as usual, after the prayer, we'll share some silence together. You're welcome to stand or raise your hand at home and here if you want to honor someone that you've lost this year and pay tribute to them. Before we begin, let's get present with the moment. I invite you all to relax your bodies. Let yourselves feel yourselves sitting where you are. Feel your feet on the floor. Relax your shoulders. Please take a deep breath with me. And again. And one more. Let us bring our hearts and minds into the spirit of prayer. O thou mysterious divine power, we are grateful for the gift of our lives on this planet, which we have named Earth. And we are especially thankful for those of every generation who have courageously met the hard challenges of life with a growing awareness of the good and the beautiful to be earned through our thoughtful efforts to assist all life to its most constructive and satisfying fulfillment. We are grateful for the gift of our lives to assist all life to its most constructive and satisfying fulfillment. It is in this perspective of gratefulness that we celebrate this day, the memory of those who founded this church and the many, many members in subsequent years who have blessed this church and this earth by their loving spirit and constructive deeds in the face of life's ever-challenging perplexities. We remain in a spirit of gratitude. Amen.
Well, good morning, everyone. Can you hear me all right? Okay, good. I just happened to think, because this morning was a little chilly. What, push this up more? Pardon?
Speak louder.
Louder, okay. Sorry. Back in the old days, way old days, in this meeting house, when they didn't have central heating, imagine how, when it was really cold, they came in here, and the only thing they had to keep themselves a little bit warmer was a foot warmer, which had coals from the wood stove that's directly behind the pulpit in what used to be the minister's office. And it's kind of wonderful that we have central heating now. It can be a little more comfortable in here. The other thing I have to just mention very quickly is that growing up here, coming to this church so early in my life, when my mother was pregnant, sitting in the whoops, louder? Okay, here, I'm going to move over. I really enjoyed coming into this meeting house, and when I was about 9 years old, I'd bring some friends in sometimes on a Saturday, and we'd run around here playing tag and occasionally having a little bit of a pillow fight and just having such a wonderful time in such a beautiful little spot. So it's very nostalgic to be here today and talk a little bit about Dad's sermon. So, Albert Schweitzer, yes, for many of us, we have mentors in life, people either in our family or from school or neighbors, or for somebody we never meet but rather read about, that becomes a mentor. We think they are very good at coping with life and dealing with life's issues, and they become an example for us. And certainly Albert Schweitzer, a theologian, an organist, particularly Bach, by the way, and that's what you're hearing mostly today, a writer, a humanitarian, and a doctor who built a hospital in Africa, as many of you may know. Much needed by a lot of Africans at that time. And so many of us have as I mentioned, mentors as to how insight into how best to live. For Dad, that was strongly Albert Schweitzer, who gave us his ethic of reverence for life, all life. Schweitzer, by the way, got the Nobel Peace Prize in 1952, as some of you may know, for Schweitzer's reverence for life concept. So, for Dad, his primary motivation of life as a minister was to reach out and to help other people, working with other religious leaders, not just Unitarian ministers, but all religious leaders. And in fact, over time, the Reverend Arthur Wilson of Beneficent Congregational Church in Providence and Rabbi Browder of Temple Bethel here on the east side, the three of them were very active together and the very best friends, particularly during the civil rights and fair housing time, when there was a lot of hesitancy about approving those issues. And as was mentioned already by Neil, the three of them sometimes had stones thrown at their house and so forth and so on. And I remember as a kid hearing the sound of the stones hitting the house. It wasn't fun. So I'm going to read this sermon, but I want to tell you, I want to thank right away the Reverend Deborah Rose and Reverend Ralph Miro for reviewing with me my dad's sermon to try to edit some of the things that weren't so relevant to the essential mission of reverence for life. And they suggested some changes and some editing, but we kept the essence of the sermon, which I'm about to read to you. So thank you, Deborah and Ralph, for your good advice and guidance. So here we go. The Jesus Schweitzer found. Does everybody hear me all right still? Okay, good. January 14th of this new year of 1965 marks the 90th birthday of Albert Schweitzer. What is more fitting at this time than to seek a fresh rendition of what he has accomplished for us in seeking to provide both historical matter and helpful interpretations by which modern religious liberals, if they choose to do so, may find a more deeply sustaining relationship with the essential spirit of the great ethical religious figure Jesus appears to have been. Perhaps our first necessity is to amplify the too abrupt and therefore somewhat misleading impression of our topic, that Jesus Schweitzer found. For at the outset, I should make clear that over many years, indeed from his childhood on, Schweitzer has been shifting and adding views and interpretations of Jesus as his own studies and insights have grown. Indeed, I doubt this process has yet ceased with the old doctor, for he has kept amazingly up to date with theological and Christological thinking in Europe and even here in America. However, a number of factors have established Schweitzer to feel that the underlying spirit he has found in the historical Jesus has been the dominating guide of the best he has tried to be and do with his whole life. We shall now try to identify and understand some of the tributary streams of influence for what help they can be to us. We are all aware that the influence of our parents, indeed all aspects of our home life, schooling, and playmates in childhood have helped us to shape early and lasting attitudes in us. This, of course, has been so far Schweitzer. Albert was the second of 5 children, having eventually 3 sisters and 1 brother, and is deeply grateful for the love and firm wisdom from which he was raised in childhood and guided as a young man. His father was a liberal Lutheran pastor of a church in Gunsbach, Alsace, and his mother the daughter of a clergyman. Since Albert was born with the endowments of a genius, which he was, by the way, and we have much illustrative material on his life showing this, it is difficult to hold ourselves to but a few statements and illustrations which can best throw light on how Schweitzer came to be the kind of deeply believing, heavily practicing liberal Christian he is. Let me try in a few comprehensive statements to delineate the main factors which underlie Schweitzer's philosophy of life. First of all, his belief in truth, the most rigorous intellectual honesty of which a person is capable, regardless of what new truth may do to his previous conceptions. I quote, "The spiritual and material misery of mankind today is delivering itself through its renunciation of thinking and the ideals which spring from it. Therefore, I picture myself in its utmost compass, and yet I remain optimistic. One belief of my childhood I have preserved with a certainty that I can never lose it. Believe in truth, because I have confidence in the power of truth and of the Spirit. I believe in the future of mankind." Along with this goes his emphasis on careful, reflective thinking, establishment of any truth. Indeed, To encourage such thinking with all people is a major aim of his life, and as he firmly believes, without such, we seriously short-circuit our own and all lives, and our civilization will perish. Oh, I'm thinking of climate issues right now. Next is his awareness of pain and suffering in the life of our world, and that we all have a responsibility to do something about it. The capacity to be aware of this suffering, to feel the pain of others in ourselves, and to act constructively for its relief, is given to us with the well-known instinct for self-preservation. What Schweitzer wants us to do is to link firmly our instinct for personal survival with the capacity for feeling suffering in others, so that our natural pity at cruelty and injustice is refined by careful thought to becoming a dominating purpose and practice in our lives. Now, you also understand something of what Schweitzer had in mind when he once wrote, "Pity is the foundation of ethics." Its emphasis on the centrality of truth, the importance of careful thinking, and the linking of our will to live with the will to love, so that the will to love becomes the dominant will, makes the foundation of his philosophy of reverence for life, all life. Of course, Schweitzer's more specifically religious views are intimately interwoven with his reverence for life philosophy. He finds traditional theological views which purport to give satisfactory explanations and answers about the final meaning and purpose of existence or the exact nature of God inconclusive and therefore unhelpful. For example, if God is a personal God, why is so much of life, including man's, so perilously at the mercy of so much that is impersonal in life? But if man has to live with such unanswered questions, what then may man see, experience, and cherish as a meaningful strand in the mysterious web of life's forces to which he may attach himself, and thereby feel himself tied into the bundle of life meaningfully? This living and meaningful strand for Schweitzer is the presence of the will to love. This given capacity for will to love is real in ourselves. We see it and feel it at work in other persons, even sometimes in the behavior of some domestic or even wild animals and birds. This helpful cooperative love can exert transforming power in creating the most out of life. In a sense, it is the priceless ingredient without which life in us and others cannot attain constructive and satisfying fulfillment. Feeling and reasoning this way about it, Schweitzer chooses it as a truth in life to focus on for all it can do in relating him to the expression and growth of capacity for goodness in himself and others, and in relating him to the vast, mysterious life thrust from which we come and in which we live and move and have our being. When he uses the term God, he is referring to this moving and majestic aspect of reality which is divinely and commandingly important to him. As a result, for him, a growing and sustaining awareness of God comes primarily from living will to love, and then reflecting inwardly for perceiving and feeling what the results develop inside himself. Here he seems to follow the pathway expressed in two lines of a Unitarian hymn. The outward God he findeth not, who finds not God within. Perhaps we should also associate with this the familiar words from the first epistle of John: God is love, and he that dwelleth in love dwelleth in God, and God in him. Yet it is only fair, and indeed helpful, to state at this point that Schweitzer feels himself completely at home with religious humanists who are focused on trying to build a more just and thoughtful society of human beings in the full spirit of will to love. With Schweitzer, this is the main job to be accomplished with our lives in this imperfect world, and a person must be, first of all, honest and sincere in his personal religious thinking. He would also add, I am sure, that we must always keep our theological thinking open for growth and change in the face of new knowledge and insights. Of course, the thoughtful theist does this just as much as the thoughtful religious agnostic or thoughtful religious atheist. To understand some major factors which appear to have shaped the dynamic and influential spirit in Jesus, which Schweitzer found, we need to make a few more observations. One certainly is the influence of Schweitzer's father as also his childhood religious teacher. By both his father's actions and preaching, the boy Schweitzer learned initially a reverence for the compassionate and liberating love his father saw in Jesus. It was the end of his first year at the University of Strasbourg, and while on maneuvers in his required military service in the fall of 1894, that Schweitzer read in Greek the 10th and 11th chapters of the Gospel of Matthew, and which brought home to him, quote, that Jesus had announced no kingdom that was to be founded or realized in the natural world by himself and the believers, but one that was to be expected as coming with the almost immediate dawn of supernatural age. So arrived the first insight which sent Schweitzer on his quest of the historical Jesus, which emerged as an epoch-making doctoral thesis in 1906 to earn him his doctorate in theology. As a thoroughgoing naturalist and rationalist with a passion for renewed ethics in life founded on the will to love, Jesus is to Schweitzer an invisible historical person whose courageous, sensitive, and constructive spirit of will to love, and felt by Jesus as the will of God for man, is clearly reflected in the sketchy accounts we have of him. Jesus is compellingly worthy of our utmost veneration of him as a great teacher, an exemplar of the spirit of life we need most. Schweitzer directs us to remember that Jesus lived, thought, and taught in the world outlook of his times. Like us, Jesus was deeply troubled by the sufferings and injustices of his day and longed for a more perfect condition of man. With so many of his contemporaries, he came to believe that God was just about to bring in this perfect condition for man, the kingdom of God, and man's immediate and only opportunity for membership in this blessed community was a complete repentance, a rethinking and redirecting of his life into conformity with God's ethical will to love before it was too late. We too have the same tortured feelings and deep upsetness over conditions in our society and world today. We too hunger for that more perfect condition of human life. We, unlike Jesus, do not expect that God is about to usher in his kingdom. However, we are painfully aware that if we cannot become more effective with an ethic based on will to love, tragic chaos may devastate life for many of mankind, let alone other forms of life. So far, So for us, there is only an urgency, even though we have no eschatological expectation. Eschatological, by the way, is end of life kind of expectations. Finally, it was because all such feelings and hopes as we have described are so sensitively present and carefully nurtured in Schweitzer himself that he could sense such were also in Jesus, and that Jesus had lived them with a superb courage and devotion, blessing many lives and faithful unto death. Thus, across and through the centuries of Jesus' Spirit calls to all receptive spirits in their time and in their circumstance to make a great spiritual response to life. To those who will so respond, life shall have new meaning and high purpose, no matter how great the difficulties, and the reward of a new and deep sense of human brotherhood and dynamic relationship with the will to love as the Spirit of God. For the faithful responders, this will put a new song in their hearts and a new light in their eyes. Okay, that's it. I just want to say one of the things that I really enjoyed as a youngster was when the congregation, Temple Bethel, Beneficent Congregation Church, when we all got together on occasion right here or at one of the other entities and worshiped together. And it was so stimulating to have that get together with different religious perspective, but respectful for one another. And I think the emphasis of love and concern for one another is very important, and they all felt that. Okay, that's it. Bye-bye, everybody.
Thank you, Sandy. Just to add one more story to all the stories we've told. One story about Schweitzer that Sandy learned from his father and told me in the course of this developing this service that he didn't mention, that I just found it gives a deeper sense of what Schweitzer meant when he said reverence for all life. The story is that apparently one time Schweitzer was meeting with Adlai Stevenson and an insect of some sort landed on Schweitzer's arm, and Stevenson brushed the insect off of Schweitzer's arm, and Schweitzer said, "Don't do that. There's no need to create suffering in that insect." So that's the breadth of the compassion that he felt. And speaking of compassion, once a month we do a community collection where our collection is passed on to a usually local organization serving the broader community. Our community collection today is to benefit Sojourner House. In Rhode Island, Sojourner House serves victims and survivors of domestic violence, sexual assault, and human trafficking. Sadly, domestic violence has increased significantly in the COVID era. Sojourner House attends to our underserved population, persons who are immigrants, undocumented, trafficked, afraid, have little or no income, and/or are homeless. They serve by providing culturally sensitive emotional support, sexual health advocacy and education, and offering supportive transitional and permanent housing. They serve equally all genders, the LGBTQ+ community, children, young adults, and undocumented victims. Please give thoughtfully and generously. As always, thank you for all that you give, all that you do, and all that you are. We have a few invitations today. The first is, in recent weeks, you may have seen some people wearing these cow ears during our outdoor fellowship time after the service, and during our Zoom coffee hour also. These are members of the music committee, or MUCOM, hence the cow ears, who are involved in a process of investigation and discernment about the musical interests and tastes of the congregation. So you are welcome and encouraged to participate in that process. Look for the ears, or if you know somebody on the committee, just talk to them. This next announcement makes implementation of the previous announcement a bit more difficult, but that's life in a community. Anyone interested in participating in a small group coffee hour should stay in the meeting house after the service. At that time, you will be organized into small groups by Louise Sloan from the Prudential Committee. These groups are meant to provide you with an opportunity to get to know one another and discuss the service in a safe, small group setting. We hope that you will consider participating in this chance to reconnect with our faith community. So after the postlude music is over, Louise will come and make a very clear, audible announcement to remind you that this is an option. There's a Path to Membership class forming, and the first session is scheduled for Tuesday, November 2nd. This is an opportunity to learn more about what it means to be a Unitarian Universalist. Might be useful even if you've been here for a little while. The unique aspects of First Unitarian Providence, and what it is like and means to be a voting member. Our membership coordinator, Jen Nardone, hosts these sessions with appearances by Reverend Liz, Reverend Roger, our Director of Religious Education, Kathy Sagel, and other assorted guests. If you're interested in knowing more or signing up, speak to Jen after the service. That's Jen. And now our benediction, which is adapted from one that Reverend Schacht gave. I found it in our history room. The date is unknown, so we can't give you a precise date, unless Robert can recognize it. May what we have said and felt here today bring more peace to our hearts, deeper resolution to our high purposes, and that larger courage for life in the spirit of love, which we sense in all great souls. Thus, may our lives be caught up in that mystic sense of belonging to each other, which can send us forth in the power of the Spirit. And now, please join in the chalice extinguishing text, which is in your order of service. We carry this flame of peace, love, and hope till we meet again.
invite you to stay behind if in the meeting house if you would like to connect and reflect in small groups. And everybody else, have a great day.